In just 14 minutes, a man who almost never spoke stumbled into a secret worth $120 million. October 12th, 2023, 10:42 p.m., Seattle, Washington. A light drizzle. Sodium streetlights bleeding into wet pavement. The kind of night where everything feels muted, except what matters most. A taxi rolls up to a narrow curb on 4th Avenue, engine humming low, wiper scraping in a slow, tired rhythm, 42 cycles per minute. The driver sits quietly, hands still on the wheel, a creature of habit, of silence, of routines so precise you could set a clock by them. A passenger steps out, the door shuts. 7 seconds of emptiness. Then he sees it. A black travel case on the back seat, no tags, no stickers, no wear marks, just sitting there, as if it had chosen him. He pulls it closer, the zipper barely makes a sound. Inside, documents, not cash. Not anything a normal person would recognize. Bearer bonds, unregistered, transferable. A form of wealth that leaves almost no fingerprints. And beneath them, a small silver USB drive with no label, no brand, no serial number, a device built to be invisible. He doesn't know it yet, but the combined value, if the numbers are real, exceeds $120 million. What makes it impossible is the silence that follows. No phone call, no email, no person running back in panic, no police report filed within the hour, the night, or even the next day, nothing. As if whoever owned that case never wanted it back. And for a man who spent his life being unnoticed, unseen, unremarked, this was the first time the world placed something unimaginable directly into his hands. But what happened next changed everything. He was 52, born in 1971 on the south edge of Tacoma, Washington, an industrial strip where freight trains ran so close to the houses that the windows shook at 64 decibels each morning. His family lived in a one-bedroom duplex. His father worked swing shifts at a plastics plant. His mother cleaned offices downtown. Nothing glamorous, nothing dangerous. Just the kind of life that leaves no traces in public memory. As a child, he rarely spoke. Teachers noted it in school logs. Quiet, reserved, observes more than he participates. Not a problem kid, not a gifted one either, just another boy who blended into the noise of a working-class district. In psychological terms, children like him often build their inner world early. Silence becomes a shelter, not a burden. By his teenage years, one thing was clear. He watched everything. He could recall which neighbor left their porch light on at 9:17 p.m. the night before. He remembered bus schedules down to the minute. He noticed patterns in people, their routines, their pauses, even the way they held anger. This wasn't brilliance, it was attention, pure, unfiltered, tireless attention. He carried this into adulthood, a life built on repetition and control. Wake up at 5:45 a.m., leave the apartment at 6:12, start the taxi shift at 6:30, every day without variance. He avoided social media entirely. No profiles, no posts, nothing that formed a digital shadow. In an era where the average American leaves dozens of data points every hour, he left almost none. Not because he feared anything, but because he never felt the need to be seen. Then, at 40, he lost his job at a distribution warehouse during a downsizing wave, one of nearly 90,000 layoffs that swept through U.S. logistics companies that year. The financial slide afterward was slow but steady. By 2020, he lived alone in a 420 square foot apartment above a laundromat. A place without luxury, without noise, without witnesses. He didn't complain, he didn't fight, he just adapted. But years of shrinking paychecks and shrinking space had an effect. People who fade from society often develop a peculiar ability. They start noticing the world more than the world notices them. They watch for small opportunities, tiny fractures, moments where routine breaks. One night, standing outside his building, he saw a delivery van stall at an intersection. Traffic froze. Drivers leaned on their horns, but he watched the scene with a different eye, a microscopic shift in the world's rhythm, a reminder that not everything holds its course forever. And in that pause, something shifted in him.
I can't believe
a thought
this.
Formed, quiet but sharp. Not every life has to stay in place. He didn't know it yet, But that single flicker of awareness, the idea that stillness could be broken, was the first step towards everything that followed. The kind of shift that happens long before a man opens a black case in the back of his taxi and realizes his world is no longer the same. He never learned the company's real name. Most people never do. From the outside, it looked like nothing. An anonymous concrete block on the north side of Bellevue, Washington. No logo on the glass, no website, no public phone number. Just a 4-story building with tinted windows and a badge reader that stayed red unless you belonged there. Even the mail arrived in unmarked envelopes. Inside, they dealt in one thing: information, personal data, financial shadows, assets stored in forms most people never touch, quiet instruments moving through digital space, often valued in the hundreds of millions. They ran their own private ledgers, off-grid, off-record, off-limit. It wasn't illegal, just invisible. Companies like this grew fast during the early 2020s. By 2022, U.S. analysts estimated that private data brokers held profiles on more than 230 million Americans. Metadata, location pings, timestamps, behavioral patterns became a currency more predictable than cash. And this particular corporation sat near the top of that food chain. Their building reflected that power. Camera domes tucked into corners where no normal visitor ever looked. Door sensors logging every entry down to the second. A security rotation designed so no guard ever repeated the same hallway path 2 nights in a row. Employees signed non-disclosure agreements measured in decades. A few signed lifetime clauses. To breach a place like this was nearly impossible. Not because the walls were thick, but because the real vaults were made of silence. No public identity meant no attack surface. And yet, every system, no matter how polished, hides a flaw. For this corporation, it came wrapped in something painfully ordinary. A low-level staffer tasked with transporting sensitive documents across the city on a Tuesday night. No escort, no scanner, no redundant tagging. Just a black case containing bearer bonds and a small USB drive that hadn't received its final encryption layer. A bag like that should never leave the building without a tracker, without redundancy, without surveillance. But that night it did. 1,000 protocols, 1 oversight. And once that case left the employee's hands, the next decision, where to set it down, when to shift in the taxi seat, how tightly to grip the handle, belonged to a human being. Humans make errors. Humans get distracted. Humans trust routines far more than they should. That's how something designed to be untouchable slipped into the back seat of a yellow cab driven by a man no one ever noticed. A place built on perfect anonymity had just collided with someone who embodied it. But every fortress has a crack. He didn't touch the money. He didn't even think about it. What gripped him wasn't greed. It was the question that wouldn't let go. Why had a case worth more than most houses in Seattle ended up in the backseat of his cab? In the days that followed, his life didn't explode. It tightened. October bled into November, 23 days of quiet observation. Mornings marked by the same 6:12 a.m. Exit from his apartment, evenings spent replaying details in his head under the dim yellow light of his kitchen. He never crossed a line, never opened a file, never contacted anyone. His entire investigation existed on paper, in a spiral notebook that cost $1.49. He built his own process. A notebook, a folded city map from 2018, a prepaid phone with no SIM card, nothing digital, nothing traceable, just ink, memory, and habit. He filled pages with small, precise notes. The passenger's height, estimated at around 5'10", the weight of the case, about 9 pounds. The exact time the door opened and closed, 10 hours, 42 minutes, and 13 seconds p.m. to 10 hours, 42 minutes, and 20 seconds p.m. Then he did what he'd always done best. He watched. He revisited the pickup point on 4th Avenue. He noted which storefront cameras faced the curb. He stood across the street, counting cars, counting pedestrians, counting the seconds between the changing lights, 94 seconds on average for eastbound traffic. He retraced the rider's exit path step by step, down the sidewalk, around the corner, past the bus stop where the 5:45 usually arrived at 10:47 p.m. For 3 nights in a row, he waited there, quiet, still, unnoticed, watching for anyone who came back looking for a lost case. No one did. Not once. Then he ran small tests of his own. He parked at the same curb where the passenger had left the cab idling for 10 minutes each night. He watched reflections in the shop windows behind him, an old trick he learned while working warehouse security in his 20s. He observed people who slowed their pace, people who scanned the street, people whose behavior didn't match the flow of the crowd, but none of them acted like someone searching for something that could destroy their career or their company. The real shift came 2 weeks in, when he compared movement patterns. He traced the rider's behavior against the typical habits of late-night fare. Most passengers check their pockets, turn around toward the cab, pat their bags, hesitate. This one didn't. Not once. Not even for a second. The case wasn't forgotten. It was abandoned. And the USB inside it, silent, metallic, with that faint heat mark near its connector, recorded a metadata anomaly on the night he found it. A timestamp with no associated device ID, a digital footprint with no foot attached. That detail stayed with him. By the end of the 3rd week, his notes filled 26 pages. Not a plan for a crime, but a map of a pattern. A shape forming around a single truth. Someone had left something valuable behind, on purpose. Someone was waiting to see who picked it up, and someone wasn't coming back for it. He didn't know what he was preparing for, but he knew this. Something was moving toward him, quietly, deliberately, inevitably. And now, everything was ready. 7:42 p.m. He returned to the curb on 4th Avenue, the exact spot where the passenger stepped out 13 nights earlier. The air carried a light November chill, around 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Storefront lights flickered across the wet asphalt. He stood still, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the sidewalk the way an investigator watches a crime scene. Quiet, patient, absorbing every detail. 7:56 p.m. he began walking the same path the passenger took. Same direction, same pace, same angles at the intersections. He traced every step with near-perfect recall. The mind of a man who spent decades studying human routine was now locked on one objective: find the missing variable. Street noise blended into a distant hum, traffic at roughly 58 decibels. He barely heard it. His focus lived in the patterns. 8:11 p.m., a small discovery. A convenience store's exterior camera, mounted 12 feet high, angled toward the sidewalk, had captured something the first night. In the footage, at precisely 10:44 p.m., a man in a gray jacket paused near the curb and asked the clerk a single question. "Did a taxi just drop someone off here?" The clerk shrugged. Nothing more, but that 2-second exchange mattered. Someone was looking for the cab, but not for the case. 8:20 p.m. He replayed the passenger's behavior in his mind. The man hadn't turned back, not once, not even when shifting the case from knee to floor. Most riders perform at least one final check. Keys, wallet, bag. Humans guard what they fear losing. This rider acted like the case wasn't his, or like he no longer cared what happened to it. And for him, that detail spoke louder than any confession. 8:37 p.m. The deeper he traced the route, the clearer the truth became. The passenger wasn't local. Not the gate. Not the posture. Not the moment he hesitated at the broken crosswalk signal near Pine Street. Something regular Seattle pedestrians do automatically. People unfamiliar with the city reveal themselves in microseconds. He saw those microseconds. 8:55 p.m. By now, a pattern formed. The case wasn't forgotten. The case wasn't misplaced. It was too heavy, too deliberate, too centered on the seat. No frantic calls to the cab company, no inquiries
Not
logged,
accidental.
no digital breadcrumbs. He knew what abandonment looked like. This wasn't an accident. It was a choice. 9:12 p.m. A single possibility emerged, quiet, unsettling, and dangerously simple. The case had been planted, left intentionally, given to him, or to whoever drove that cab next. But the timing was too tight, too exact, too aligned with his shift, his route, his schedule. Someone had known he would be there. And that was the thought that finally broke the rhythm of his analysis. The moment where logic collided with something colder. Because if the case was planted, then whoever planted it wasn't tracking the bag. They were tracking the person who picked it up. And then, the unexpected happened. He noticed it at 1:14 a.m., long after the street outside his window had gone quiet. The USB ledger, cold, metallic, untouched for days, lit up his old laptop with a single new entry. One log, one timestamp, one access attempt. But the device ID didn't match anything in known registries. Not a phone, not a computer, not a server, just a string of characters that pointed nowhere, like a signal coming from a machine that shouldn't exist. For a man who lived his life inside patterns, this was the first fracture. At 1:26 a.m., another anomaly surfaced. The security camera mounted above the laundromat entrance, 12 feet below his apartment, glitched. 54 seconds of static. Not before, not after, only during that narrow window. And when the feed returned, a figure stood on the sidewalk, motionless, head down, hands in pockets, rain pooling around his shoes at roughly a quarter-inch per hour. He didn't look up, not once, not toward the camera, not toward the stairs leading to the driver's apartment, just the silent presence at 1:27 a.m. on a night when no one else was outside. In criminal psychology, this kind of behavior is rare. Not surveillance, not intimidation, just observation. Clean, distant, deliberate. A reminder that the threat wasn't the suitcase, but the attention that followed it. And that was the danger. No one had come back for the case. No missing property reports, no frantic searches, no corporate claims. Yet someone was watching him, not the object, the man who found it. His response was immediate, instinctive, and controlled. He powered down his phone, battery out, not just off. He unplugged the cheap webcam taped to his laptop. He checked the peephole twice without touching the door frame. At 3:12 a.m., he slipped out of his apartment with a quiet precision that suggested he'd rehearsed exits like this in his mind for years, down the back stairs, across the alley, into the early morning fog where footsteps disappear faster than questions. To the outside world, nothing happened that night, just another quiet hour before dawn. But for him, it was the moment the story tilted, the moment routine cracked, the moment observation became survival. Somehow, he survived the moment. By sunrise, the room looked unchanged. Same dim light, same peeling paint, same quiet air trapped behind the thin apartment walls. But something was missing. The black case was gone, not moved. Gone. No broken lock, no scratches on the door, no forced entry. Nothing that would register as intrusion by any standard police metric. Just an empty patch of carpet where 9 pounds of documents once sat. The USB ledger disappeared with it. No trace on a desk, no dust pattern disturbed, only the faint outline where it had rested for 21 days. When officers finally reviewed the scene, the report was short, barely 3 paragraphs. Residence intact. No sign of struggle. No evidence of criminal activity. In law enforcement language, the phrase is simple, case closed. But it wasn't closed, not really. A week later, a small local paper ran a 2-sentence filler story in its metro section, right below a column on rising bus fares. Unidentified corporate documents recovered by private security, no public risk reported. No mention of a taxi driver, no mention of a missing case, just a vague acknowledgement that something unusual had briefly surfaced, and then quietly disappeared. And the man at the center of it, he didn't file complaints. He didn't call the police again. He didn't return to the taxi stand on 3rd Avenue where he'd worked for nearly 7 years. He simply stepped out of his routine and out of public view. No new address, no forwarding information, no financial activity after November 2023. In a country of more than 330 million people, one more silent record didn't trigger alarms. It just blended into the noise. To neighbors, he was the quiet man upstairs. To the city, he became nothing at all. Another name with no digital pulse. A person who slipped beneath the data layer of modern life. And stayed there. But the story wasn't over. The final access log on the USB never made sense. A single connection at 2:03 a.m. from a device with no registered MAC address, no manufacturer signature, and no trace in any public database. A digital fingerprint with no hand behind it.
Did you see that?
Investigators quietly
Yes,
admitted
I think
they
so.
had never seen a signal shaped like that. From there, theories spread in low, cautious tones. Some believed a mid-level employee tried to leak internal data and lost control of the handoff. Others claimed the suitcase was placed randomly, meant for whoever happened to be driving that night. But one idea surfaced more than the others, that the taxi driver was chosen not because he mattered, but because he didn't. A man invisible enough to overlook. A man no algorithm would flag. Only one piece of evidence remained. A grainy traffic camera frame from November the 22nd, 3:14 a.m. A taxi rolling through an empty intersection. Headlights on, engine running, but no one behind the wheel. Just 94 pixels of unanswered questions. And in a world built on data, one truth lingered like static beneath the noise. If a man no one noticed could hold a $120 million secret, how many others could be hiding in plain sight? Or maybe the truth disappeared with him.